Okay, good morning. We are starting Hilchos Heksher Keilim of Siman Kuf Chaf, which is Dinei Tevilas Keilim. So based on some books you might find in the store, you would assume we've got about 20 simanim going forward. And of course, it's only one. I guess some people managed to fill up a whole book. So here we have, anyways, it's a big topic. I'm assuming we'll do about 2 or 3 days worth. And I'll probably say let's learn it inside, and stay tuned for the next day or two to get the full picture, because we might revisit something. Let's start with Aleph. We'll start. Hakona mehagoy klei seuda. So what's the story? You buy dishes from a non-Jew. It was owned by a non-Jew. Now the Jew buys them and he wants to use them for food. So in that case, there's a mitzvah in the Torah. Again, we're going to mention it's either deraisa or an esmakta, so it's only derabanan. But we learn it out from the whole story of the Jews when they fight with Midian. They take the clay Midian it's in Bamidbar, Perak Lamed Hey. If you look in the Taz, he quotes, Kol davar asher yavo ba'esh, anything that goes through fire. So we learn from there what goes through fire, klei seuda. So we learn from there. It's talking about klei seuda, and it says v'taher. You have to. It talks about mayim. So the question is it just talking about koshering the dishes, or is it talking about tevilas keilim? So that's the machloket rishonim. Most rishonim say it is a din de'oraisa. It's the Rambam who writes. It's only, the whole thing is made up. It's all derabanan. The reason they give is, and I'll read it from the Taz. Kadei sheyetzu mitumato shel oved kochavim liktushato shel Yisrael. Because we're Jews, we're holy Jews. We want to eat properly, be kedusha. So therefore, our dishes also have to be removed from the tumah of the goyim and to the Kedushas Yisrael. But this has nothing to do with Tuma and Tara. Now, although having said that, you might think, Seches Keilim, Mishnayos, that's not halacha l'maisa, but the truth is, from those 30 prakim, you can actually get a few nuggets out of there that do have halachic ramifications for certain halachas, such as Tevilas Keilim. We'll mention as we go along, maybe a couple examples. But we'll mention a couple examples. Okay. So it does help to learn Maseches Keilim. Okay. Let's see. What do I want to point out? So we mentioned about din deraisa, din derabanan. It's just interesting to note how many metals are mentioned in the psukim. Only 6. So Lahalacha Rav Moshe Feinstein Nigos Moshe Chelik Gimel of Yoreh Chelik Gimel. Okay, and it's he has a few tshuvas from like Kaf Bet, Kaf Aleph until like Kaf Dalet about Tevilas Keilim. So there he writes that only the 6 metals that are mentioned in the Chumash are deraisa, and that's where Tuman Tara applies. But all other metals are derabanan. And everyone agrees that klei zechuchit, all the Rishonim, is only midarabanan, but it only talks about metal. The question is it only the 6 metals or all metals? So that's Moshe's psak. And so therefore anything that's aluminum, for example, would only be darabanan. Similar to klei zechuchit. And they say, why is klei zechuchit? So we're going to see that. It's because you're able to refashion it. Pottery, we all say cheres is all darabanan. There's no way to refashion it. It breaks, it's whatever, you break it. You can't melt it down and rebuild with it. But metal, which is deraisa, perhaps, that you can melt down and refashion it. So that has the same properties of glass. So that's why glass, chazal, were added. Okay, I'll just mention, so most poskim say plastic is also derabanan, never existed, or never goes there it. But there is a minority opinion of that since you can melt it down, it's Keilu Chazal had it in mind. When they were gozer glass, they had in mind, so to speak, plastic in the future. So that's that. Okay, this is something very interesting. We said and this is going to come up. Safek daraisa l'chumra, safek darabanan l'kula. So keep this in mind. We said according to most poskim, it's daraisa by most metals, or at least 6, maybe all. Okay. So metal, in general, we're going to say is daraisa. Glass is darabanan. However, there's a general machloket. If you have a machloket rishonim, if it's darabanan or daraisa, let's say 50-50, what do you do? So that's a question. Do you say safek l'kula or safek l'chomra? But I believe in this case, most will say safek l'chomra, because most rishonim do hold Tevilas Keilim is daraisa. However, this is important. This you'll see in the Bir Halacha, in Orach Chaim. Bir Halacha talks about Yoreh sometimes. So in Orach Chaim, in Shin Chaf Gimel, Seif Zayin. So the Bir Halacha is over there. The Shulchan is talking about doing Tevilas Keilim on Shabbos. So normally we prefer not to do Tevilas Keilim on Shabbos, but you're mataking the kli. Again, daraisa, darabanan. It's not nicker, so it's a whole machlokas what to do. L'chatchila we prefer not to. Fine. But in that Bir Halacha, he points out, even according to the opinions that say Tevilas Keilim is daraisa, there's a chiyuv to do it. To use it one-off once in a while, there's no isser daraisa to use the kli. Let's say you don't have where to tovel the mikvah. It's Shabbos, whatever the situation is. He might say it's better to tovel, but that's that sugya over there. But what he does point out is often for you to, maybe in general you have to tovel the kli, but for you right now it can often be a din darabanan, a safek darabanan lakula, and you can use the dish without toveling because you're just using it, You're using, there's a chiyuv to tovel it, but you're just using it in advance. And that isser is only midarabanan. So if you don't know if you need to be tovel or not, so in that case, for example, you have a dish, you don't know if it needs to be toveled or not. So sometimes we say, tovel it, be machmer, don't say bracha, whatever. But when it comes to Shabbos there, he says, no, for sure you can tovel a chatchila. Even though it's a machloket, because it's a suffix if you're accomplishing anything. So that's the Bir Halacha and Yechavadas and Dalet Mem Dalet, they paskin like this, that really for you yourself, it's often just a chiyuv darabanan, and so therefore a suffix might be lekula. So it comes up quite a bit, but it's an important klal or a theme to keep in mind. Okay, let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch. Sorry for that. Hakonem me'agoy klei seuda shel matachet o shel zechuchit. So either one, at least on a darabanan level, or Keilim hametzupim be'ever mibifnim, or you have dishes that are covered in lead in one of the metals. Whether the post can point out, it doesn't matter if it's on the inside or the outside. If it's coated, then it's chayav. If it's we're not talking about just a little like a button for decoration. We're talking about it's coated and it's part of the kli. It's useful. So then we're going to see it as we keep reading. It might be a suffix. So on that situation, you would tovel it b'li bracha. So let's keep reading. Afal pi shehem chadashim. Even though they're brand new, they've never been used before. There's no issue of kashrus. Sarich lahatabilam. So then you're allowed to. You need to tovel it b'mikveh or b'mayan shel arba'im se'ah. So this is another big sugya. We'll just touch the surface. It needs to go into a mikveh or a mayan of 40 se'ah. Now, does it really need to be 40 or not? So, lahalacha, it's clear. Whether you're using a mikveh or a mayan, it needs to be 40 se'ah. That's clear, lahalacha. But that's only on a darabanan level. Now, what's the difference between a mikveh and a mayan? A mikveh is basically, put it simple, basically a gathering of rainwater. Basically, rainwater will be your mikveh. That fills up your bore, your pit, whatever it is. And, right, not mayim shuvim. Mayan is a well spring. The water, it's not from the rain, it's from a spring that comes underground and it's flowing. Good, your pit doesn't have to be flowing anymore, but the source of the water is from a spring. So I'll just point out there's a few opinions. If you look in the Biragra, we're not going to do a whole share on this, but just Bekitzer, there is a concept that a mayan is metaher bekolshehu. A spring only needs to be a kolshehu to be metaher. But that's a din daraisa. Midarabanan, it also needs to be 40 sa. In other words, it just has to be bigger than the kli. If you have a little fork, your mayan only needs to be big enough that if you can put your fork completely inside. A needle, exactly. Whatever it is. So that's midin Torah. Midarabanan, that doesn't apply for us. A mikveh, it's a machlokas if it needs to be 40, or maybe even a revi'it is enough. But again, that's all midin Torah. Some say a mayan for people needs to be 40 sa. It's only by a kli. Again, that's all machloket rishonim and the sugya level of daraisa midarabanan. Again, that's the halacha. We said everything has to be 40. Okay. Fine. Let's go on. Haga. Let's keep. V'yesh omrim the Keilim hamitzupim bever afilu bifnim yitbol below bracha v'chen noagin. So Ramah is basically just repeating what we learned, and he just points out that, but you do it without a bracha because it's a machlokas. Okay, I think we're going to start bed. I'll just a couple interesting things in Pischei Tshuva. It's a big topic, so we'll do this a little bit slower than usual. Pischei Tshuva, he quotes the Chochmas Adam. He talks about big vats for cooking. He says you should have to take these giant vats to Tovel. But he says maybe it's mutter if he thinks even if they are attached to the ground, you still need to. But so that's also a big sugya. Anything that's mechubar lakarka might be pater. So that's a discussion. He says, really, what you should do is you should take the vats after you buy it from a goy, make a hole, and then repair it. So you took it away from being a kli from a goy, and now it became a kli only through a Jew when you seal up the hole. Okay, that's what he points out. But he says maybe it's not really ready. We're going to get into this. If it's a kli that's only used too much in advance, then it's not really on a level of klei seuda. It's more like pre-seuda. So then it's pater. So we're going to see that. So he says you still have to, not sift it, filter it. So it's not ready to be used right away. So that's another reason. Some point out anytime you have a kli that's only for storage, it could be a mutter. Here in the Pischei Tshuva, he talks about porcelain. So he says that they don't need, anyways, but because of the glaze, some are machmer. Well, just different opinions. Really, if it's kli cheres itself, it's for sure pater, but because of the glaze, that might have a din of glass. So that's some are machmer for that. He points out also in the Pischei Tshuva V'Shem LeChochmas Adam that you have to do the entire kli all at once. You can't do half at a time. Sometimes there's kulas for koshering to do half at a time, but that does not apply to the mikvah. Whenever somebody needs to be tovelt, it always has to be all at once. And this is about, it's not the same, but it's similar to the dinim of tuma and tara. But again, this has nothing to do with the real halachas of tuma and tara. But to learn the details of the halacha, it's generally modeled after tuma v'tara. But it's different than treif. Like there's no isser belua. Those are different halachas. So that's important distinction. Okay. Fine. Let's go on. Interesting. This will come up more later in Reish Aleph by Hilchos Magvos. He just points out using snow might be mutter But here he says in the Chachmas Adam, it should only be used for glass, which is Durabana. If you want to go outside on a snowy day and dip your dishes in the snow as a kosher mikvah, he says only to do it with zchuchit. Anyway, tzarachion on that one, if other things are good enough. Let's go to bed. Sarich shtei kli rafui biyado bishat tvila. Okay, so now you come to the mikvah, you say the bracha, you're about to put it in. We'll get into the bracha soon. Now, how tight can you hold it? Everything is dry when you put it in, right? Your hands are dry, the Keilim are dry, you try and put it in the mikvah. So it must be where you hold it very loose so that water can get between your fingers and the kli. She'im mehadko, but if you hold it tightly, biyado, have chatzitza. It's going to be a chatzitza. Where you're touching your dry hands and the dry kli, there's no water, it's a chatzitza, and it wasn't toveld, right? The whole thing has to be at the same time. V'im lichlach yada b'mayim techila ein lachush. But since they're wet, if you get your hands wet beforehand, it's not a problem. Because it's hashaka, it's connected, that's the expression for taros. As long as there's moisture from the water in between your hand and the item, it's all connected, and then the keilu is connected, and therefore it's as if the whole thing was in the Mei Mikvah. The Haggah adds a chumrah, so it's a question. V'davka shalichlech yadav b'mei mikvah, avalo b'mayim telushim. So the Ramah has a chumrah that some hold by, some say there's no difference. He says you can't just use any water. It has to be water from the mikvah. Some say, what's the difference? Once you pull the water out of the mikvah, because you get your hands wet, and then you're going to put it back in, once the water came out, there's no difference between that and fresh from the sink. So there's the faucet. So there's no, but anyways. So according to the Ramah, you have to do it while your hand is still, right. According to that opinion, in the Ramah, you'd have to make sure you do it while your hand is still in the mikvah. But Pasha says it's not, okay. Anyway, so how you understand the Ramah, fine.
During the Meister, how tight can you hold the cleat? During the Meister.
Right, so I wouldn't hold it too tight unless your hands are wet.
Let's go for a moment.
But if your hands are wet, you're pretty good. Okay. Fine, let's go on. Gimel, yeah. Yevarich al tevilas keli, v'im hem shnayim o yoter mevarich al tevilas keli. So pretty simple. You go to the mikvah, asher kedishim l'sanu. You say al tevilat keli if there's one, or keilim if there's two or more. And I think that's the minhag with it. I don't think there's any different minhagim on that one. In the earlier sources, there are some different opinions. There is an opinion mentioned in the Taz of saying al tevilas kli matechet or matechot, because you want to emphasize that matechet is aser and other things, or chaya, but other things are not. To try and be more specific. But the Taz and others say that's a little strange, because in all brachos, we don't start listing all the pratim of every seif. We don't start throwing in details. It's not the place for the bracha to start teaching details. And if you want to give details, the bracha should be a lot longer. You should add klei seuda or shel seuda v'chul, and you just keep on going. So that's, we generally don't worry about that. Just points out we do mention it by Chanukah, because if you just mention ner, it really doesn't say much. So anyways, but Shabbos, whatever. But anyways, the minhag is not to change the minhag, and that's fine. There is an opinion just that says lahat bil, but we don't do that either. Okay, just let's see. Okay. Now, anytime, even if you have more kids, it's brought down in the Gra. If you have many brachos, I mean, if you're doing many mitzvahs, of course, it's from a Tosefta, I think. But of course, if you do many mitzvahs that are different, every mitzvah you say its own bracha. But In contrast, if you have many Keilim, or if you're going to put on many tzitzis at the same time, or you're doing many dishes at the same time, you just say one bracha for all of them. Okay, let's do Dalit. Chiptish. This is basically triptish. What? Tripod? Tripod. Okay. Anyways, this is referring to the grates or the grill or the blech or the stovetop. Shesoftin alehem kedera, that you put the pot on top of it, right? You don't hold it in the air on top of the fire. It's being held up by something. Einam teunin tevila. These items don't need tefillah. You don't put the food directly on them. It's not for cooking. It's to support the dishes. Aval, you want to help me with this one? Paidelish teunos tefillah. But if it's something, I don't know, grill maybe, something that you put the actual food on directly, so that's something that you need to, it needs tefillah. Something that needs tefillah is anything that's used for the main part of the meal. We're going to see more coming up. Or cooking to make it, now it's ready to eat, and it comes in contact with the food. Corkscrew, for sure, would not be chayav. It has nothing to do with the food itself, for example.
Is it food directly cooked?
It has nothing to do with cooked or not cooked. It doesn't matter if you prepare it on the food, but if it's something you can't eat it until it's cooked, and you're just using the kli. That's what we're about to see. So let's keep reading inside. Hey, sakin shel shchita. If you have the knife for shchita, so right after you shchita, are you eating the animal? No, you still have to prepare. You still have to use it. You still have to prepare the food. Oh, sakin shemafshitin bo, or the knife that you use to flay to remove the skin. Yesh mishomer she'eno tzarich tevila. So that's the halacha according to Shulchan Aruch. Such an item does not need tevila whatsoever, because it's not ever used for food directly, and it's pre-food, it's pre-cooking. Okay. Haga v'yesh chalkin. Now the Rama says there is an opinion, and he's machmelach v'tov lo below bracha. So the Rama says lachatchila you should use a knife because it could be used for cutting your watermelon. It could be, theoretically, you save it, but you could use it for other foods, even though it's at an early stage, but even before the cooking. So these might be the metal rollers or the pins or something you use for the matzah, for dough. You're using this for the dough before it's not edible now. This is using anything you use for the dough. You're going to use the rolling pins, a cookie cutter. Again, my daughter was pointing out that it depends. Cookie cutters, some people only use it for dough. Some people use it to shape their food, for presentation. So if you're buying your cookie cutters to, form your rice or to form your, whatever you're using, it might be chayav. But if it's a metal, not if it's plastic. Correct. But if but your cookie cutter that's only if you buy it, again, this is a whole other sugya. Keeps going. Does it go by the person who buys it? Does it go what most people use? So that's again, basically, I'll just mention that's machlokes achonim exactly how you define it. But let's say chances are, if you're the one who's buying it, and it's normally used. Cookie cutters are a great example because they're usually just used for dough. And if that's why you buy it and you're only planning to use it for dough, so then it's pater. There is an opinion that says, well, if you use it once now, maybe you're chayav because you're using it once. Okay, so that's we'll leave that as a suffix. Or a machlokas. It might not be a suffix for you, but it's a machlokas. Right? Every suffix you don't have to always run to Tovel. Depends what it is. So anyways, let me finish this one. Einam tzrichem tevila. So if you have an item that's used, so this is the opinion we see of the Ramah, and I believe it's the Shach as well. since the difference between the clay shchit, the knife of a shchita, and the, let's say, we'll call it a metal rolling pin or whatever, or something that you use maybe to cut, you could be, they have these metal pricks with rollers to make holes in your matzah if you go to a factory. Anyways, the point being, the difference between the two is a knife, theoretically, you can cut with it food. So it could be called a clay seuda. That's where the Ramah and the Shachar Machmer. But when it comes to this other item, it's not chayav at all because it's pre-clay seuda. It's like, but even before you cook it, it's like too early, and it has no other purpose. So in that case, there's no reason to be machmer. Okay, it might be a machlokas taz if I to see again inside, but the taz might be machmer lechatchila in that second case of the barzalim. I have to see. Anyways, let's keep reading. V'chen kisui shekofin hapat lefoto aval kisui kedera tzarich tevila. So here, now this is also the top of your lid. Let's say you're cooking a pot. A soup. You have the lid of the soup. We'll finish with this. Does the lid touch the food? So indirectly with the steam. So it's chayav. You see the Ramah, since the lid is covering the food, it's chayav in Tevilah. But if it's just a covering that's not essential to the cooking, or it's not helping the cooking, just because you have some kind of a lid there on top of the bread or whatever it is, when it's on top of the pot, it's chayav with the steam. But if it's just something that's pretty much air dry and it's not really helping the cooking, we had this by the ovens, for example, just as a comparison. Anyway, in that case, it's not chayav. Fine. We'll stop here for now.